about the law. Murphy's Law Podcast, your host, Ian Murphy.
And I'm just like,
this is hard for him to hold back.
So much I want to share.
Remove all the emotion from all of this stuff.
And they never wanted this to happen to the citizens again.
We never stop growing as an individual, right?
Welcome to this week's episode of Murphy's Law Podcast. With me, as usual, my good friend and partner in crime, Chris Coon. Thanks, buddy, for joining us again. We've had a lot to go over in the last couple of weeks. We've missed some stuff. We just kind of had to shuffle it to the side, unfortunately. But there was a couple of bills in the House that we would have loved to have seen happen. But, you know, they were kind of just kind of bullshit.
Get rolled.
Yeah.
Bills,
if you will. Somebody's at least trying, right?
But we've had an endless supply of material to go through between SCOTUS rulings and the Biden administration and our local shit show. I mean, the content just keeps coming. It's getting hard to keep up with.
We've had great opportunities to interview a couple of governor candidates. So we've had Ryan Kelly on. We've had Ralph Rabant has also been on. I got the great opportunity to interview Tudor Dixon earlier today. I haven't met Tudor before. She is one of a couple of candidates that I haven't had a chance to meet in person. So today was kind of the first opportunity to meet her, even though it was virtually. She was gracious enough to give us 20, 30 minutes of her time earlier today. You know, all of these candidates are awfully busy doing tons of press, especially today. We're recording this, what does it say, Friday?
Yep.
So there's been a Supreme Court ruling about Roe v. Wade, which we briefly discuss in the interview, which if we want, we'll go ahead and roll that interview right now.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Murphy's Law Podcast. Today, I am very lucky to have joining us Tudor Dixon, who is a Republican candidate for governor right here in Michigan. Thank you, Tudor, for taking the time out of your busy schedule for joining us today on Murphy's Law.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So for those that have been paying attention to our show and obviously the gubernatorial race, seems like the field has been cut in roughly half. We have spoken with a couple of the other candidates, but I just want to give you a couple of moments to introduce yourself to our audience so they can kind of get to know Tudor a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah. Let me tell you a little bit about my background. I come from a manufacturing background. My family had a steel foundry in Muskegon, Michigan. I worked in the foundry. I went to forging after that. And most recently, I've been in the media. So I did have an afternoon show on Real America's Voice for 2 hours a day, where we interviewed congressmen and senators and talked to Democrats and reached across the aisle, or maybe argued a little bit across the aisle, but that really propelled me into the political world in a new way. And I had been kind of working to get conservative voices out there for the past 5 years. So this next jump into politics seemed like the right move. When I worked with my dad, he oftentimes said to me, don't come into my office with a problem if you don't have a solution. I don't need a reporter. And I got to the point where I was saying, I'm always reporting on this stuff. What can I do about it? We looked at the governor's race, and it seemed very winnable at that point. And we still think that the governor is extremely vulnerable. I mean, especially from the restaurant community. As you know, she was brutal. She shut people down, and then she was vindictive and went back after people. Same with the attorney general. And that's why that race is so important. We have Matt DePerno running for attorney general, and we think it's very important that people come out for governor, attorney general, and secretary of state, so that we can make sure this doesn't happen again, that government is not weaponized against the people. But the state is in a critical point right now, because we also need to improve our education system. The education system's been in decline for many years, and the latest report shows that by 2030, we'll be in the bottom 5 states in the nation if we don't do something quickly. So we want to quickly get in and improve education, improve public safety, bring back a workforce, and become a friendly government to businesses like you.
Yeah, that has been a very interesting topic as of late. You know, we've heard about some happenings with Kellogg and the Battle Creek area, and their whole identity with being revolved around Kellogg's. We're seeing a pattern, unfortunately, where our state has really not been friendly, not just in the last 2 years, but for quite some time now. We're always talking about on our program, you know, so many layers of administrative, this, that, and regulatory, and it's only gotten worse. And now in the last couple of years, we've obviously seen the governor taking some of that executive authority and using it and then found unconstitutional, and then delegating some authority to the health department in that broad ranging, we always call it the 2253, which has now been ruled unconstitutional, even though it is being challenged by the state in the Court of Appeals, and they even actually applied to the state Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, I believe about a month, 2 months ago, that they're not going to take up this case on a bypass application. If anything, the Court of Appeals can hear it first if they deem it worthy to be heard regardless. We have not talked about on our program, but there was a case that came out of the Court of Claims a few weeks ago, the T&V Associates case. That judge there actually ruled that 2253 was constitutional, even citing INRI certified questions, which is the case that took down the Emergency Powers of the Governor Act. So we see that they're already trying to stack the deck for if a time comes when the Court of Appeals potentially could take this case. Now they have one case saying, our case saying it's unconstitutional. Now they have a Court of Claims case saying that it is constitutional. But anybody that takes and reads any of these cases, the INRI certified questions case, our case with Judge Hunter, and then this thing, you're going to see that these are worlds apart. One thing that I heard you mention earlier in your introduction was, you're always working on an action plan. I don't want to talk about it. Let's do something. And I think that is really what this state needs, is somebody that is going to look at that point of view. A business background certainly helps, because those of us in business, we don't get to talk. I don't get to call up the power company and talk my way out of paying the power bill. I got to keep my business open. And that's why we fought the mandates in the fall of 2020. But one of the other things that we're always discussing beyond the overreach and the mandates is giving the power back to elected officials and accountability. But what we're seeing today as we're doing this interview, the Supreme Court has reversed Roe v. Wade. I want to make sure that I get the language correct on that. But basically, and I don't want to get into Roe v. Wade or abortion necessarily evenly, but what's interesting about this as it relates to us is they're giving, we talked about this briefly before, that they're giving the decision-making back to the states, back to the legislatures, back to the people ultimately, right?
Right, absolutely. So this is very important because a lot of people, there's a lot of chatter across the country saying that this makes abortion illegal across the country. That's not what's happening. It is giving the decision-making power back to the states, because the states should be making decisions. It's similar to what we're seeing right now in energy. Honestly, I was talking to someone earlier today and they said, we need the states to go back to making the decisions about drilling and how the licensing goes and the regulatory code for drilling in individual states, rather than having the federal government be able to shut down all of our energy sources and shut down our energy independence. These are things that the states have power. The states should be able to take these things back. And for me, I'm very excited about today's decision. I think this is a long time coming. A lot of people have fought for the chance to overturn Roe v. Wade and take it back to the states. Many states already have laws in their constitution that make a decision on when or how or if you can have an abortion. The interesting part about Michigan is that we know that this governor wants to have abortion up to the moment of birth. And so that's why elections are so important. But I want to go back to what you were talking about with the shutdowns, because you made a very interesting point. You said, more than just the past 2 years has been hard. This administration has been hard on business in general, and that continues. In fact, we have some businesses that are so afraid of the retribution of this governor coming back after them that they don't even want to talk about the race, because they just say, we're hoping someone beats her, but we're afraid to get involved for fear she'll come after us. But that's how her administration really works. They're the bureaucracy is going after people, whether it's through the licensing organization, permitting, environmental, whatever it is. We have a government that right now is going after business. So whether I talk to the largest business in the state or some of the smallest businesses in the state, they say Michigan is just not willing to come to the table and work with us, and we have to change that right away. And I know you feel that every day.
Yeah, I kind of have a shit-eating grin on my face as you're talking about this, and not because it's funny, but we're still fighting the Liquor Commission. I have a hearing a couple of days from now, actually 5 days from now, another Zoom hearing. They're trying to find me in violation for being open. Well, they did it originally December of 2020. Then they came back basically a month later, January 6th, 2021. Could be coincidental. They came back in and then gave us another violation. So even though we have gone through that process, and now this law that they're trying to find us in violation of has already been found unconstitutional, even in our county, forget about the state. So they're continuing to come after us. And the other part, the reason why I'm kind of grinning is I just opened an envelope from, you can see PAC on that political action committee. This is the Michigan Licensed Beverage Association. And right here from the beginning, it says, the MLBA has been fighting for the rights of bar and restaurant owners since 1939. It goes on, but it's basically BS from there on out. The MLBA was never anywhere close to helping me as a licensee fight the battle against the Liquor Commission, the Health Department, the Michigan Department of Agriculture, OSHA, the city of Gaylord. This is exactly the problem. We
and on top of the fact that
buried on top of us.
And on top of the fact that you as restaurants, I know, went to the governor and said, we have a safety plan. We want to be able to open. And you were open while other businesses were open. The idea that someone is essential and someone is not, there's no room for that anymore. We can never treat people like that again. And little did we know that government would be able to treat people like that. And ultimately, you're right, it was deemed unconstitutional. So for them to go back now, think about this. This is when people say that this governor is vindictive and she wants to enact revenge on people. I mean, what more could this be? Going back to a restaurant that fought her orders. But what choice did restaurants have? We had at least 3,000 restaurants close across the state. And no matter how many times restaurants went to her with a safety plan, which ultimately, if you are a business, safety is always your number one concern. Regardless of how many times they went to her with a safety plan, they got nothing back. In fact, she went after you. She went after Marlena. There were multiple places that she just went after and shut down. And then when she couldn't do it herself, you're right, she weaponized the health department. It sounds like that's happening with liquor control now. I think we are now past the pandemic and this is still coming back to you. It's crazy. And what would another 4 years mean?
It is absolutely. And to that point, they have actually postponed the portion of that hearing that relates to our violation of 2253. They haven't dismissed it. They have postponed it. Why they haven't dismissed it, we can only guess. I have many ideas of why that might be, but let me ask you one. I've got two more questions for you. This one's really easy. My co-host Chris Coon, who joins me on the podcast, his question, he wants to know what sets Tudor Dixon apart from her opponents in this primary.
Well, honestly, I think that what we've been talking about is what sets me apart. Having had a small business, because we had a foundry on the lake in Muskegon, and we understood what it was. I understand what it is to deal with government. And even back then, even 20 years ago, we had government heavily involved in our business, and we understood we were a manufacturing company and we had a lot of codes to adhere to, but it was very overbearing. Now, as I go around the state, companies tell me we have, whether we're builders, whether it's a farmer, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a manufacturer, the government is overbearing. And I understand what it is to be on the other side of the government. And therefore, I think that I'm in a unique position to go into government and say, we've got to make some changes or the state's really in serious trouble, because no matter who I talk to, whether it is our biggest businesses again, or our smallest businesses, they are considering leaving, and that could be catastrophic for the state. So from a business perspective, I understand that world better than really any of the other candidates, but also I'm a mom of 4 daughters. And so I'm walking alongside every other parent who's out there dealing with the education system as it is right now. And as I said, our education system is in serious decline. We also had a Supreme Court decision that came out of the Maine case that said that they are going to allow dollars to follow the child in that state to religious schools. That's an opportunity for us here in the state of Michigan to have dollars follow the child. This is something we want. We want to get our kids back on track. I'm walking alongside the parents who have kids that have fallen behind because I'm feeling it myself. Our kids were out of school longer than most other students across the nation, and they're behind. We have to have a true plan to catch up. We came up with a tutoring plan. The governor, about 7 days later, came up with the same tutoring plan. So we feel that she's watching us. We don't want to give her advice on governing. We'd rather go in there and make sure the state thrives when it comes to business, when it comes to education, and when it comes to public safety, which are all the reasons, all the issues that impact whether or not people move to the state of Michigan. And we are desperately in need of at least 1 million more people to come to this state. And we believe that we have the resources and tools to make sure that that can happen.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing up the education point, because so many of our viewers are involved and listen to the updates that we give on the mask mandates and how we've been, I shouldn't say we, but collectively have been fighting those health departments and the schools. Sometimes they're together, sometimes they're separate. But the other thing that I did want to mention from your comment there is that there is really something to be said for those of us that have ever been in small business, owned a small business, ran a small business, employed people. The name of the game is cutting spending, right? Government doesn't make money, but they sure can save money. So I can appreciate that point of view beyond a mom of 4 and the coordination that it takes to do that and everything else that you do. So the last question that I wanted to have ask you, very, very, very simple. Where is the next place that folks can come meet and greet Tudor Dixon for governor?
Yeah, we have an event in Traverse tomorrow. So Traverse City area, I believe will be in. So we'll put that out. Actually, we'll put a notification out on Twitter today so that people can make sure they're there. It's early in the morning, about 10 a.m. We'll be up there meeting and greeting people. And then there's a Kalamazoo GOP pig roast on Sunday afternoon. So we'll be over there on Sunday. We'd love to have people come out. We want to meet as many folks as we can.
Sounds good. Tudor Dixon, thank you so much for taking the time to be on our silly little podcast, as I like to call it. I know you've got a very, very busy schedule. Good luck in everything that you do. Thank you for the support. Thank you for taking the time. Tudor Dixon, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Big thanks to Tudor Dixon for taking the time.
Yeah, really good interview.
Yeah, she's very articulate. Having some background being on TV certainly helps. Having a background as a business person in this current environment certainly helps as well. So she sounds like a great candidate for governor.
Well, and if you check her out on her website, I mean, quite an impressive story as to how she's gotten to where she's at.
Yeah.
And she's been through a lot. I mean, she's clawed her way through it.
And, we always tell it like it is here. And
no, what?
They're right. Imagine that. So there is something to be said for another female going up against another female candidate. Whatever that looks like, I don't really know what that means, but there is something to be said for that. And maybe she can get away with going after the governor in certain ways that potentially the other candidates can't.
I'd put my money on Tudor. Gretch is going down.
All the poll numbers are heading in the right direction for all the candidates. So it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, August 2nd primary is coming. What do we got? I can't even keep track of how many days there are now. 40 some days.
6 weeks.
I don't know. I don't do math well. I don't need to. I have a calculator on my phone.
Exactly. God bless that phone.
So one of the things we did talk about in Tudor's interview was the SCOTUS ruling today about Roe v. Wade. Yep. And I mentioned in the interview that I don't we're not interested in the emotion around this ruling. As we always say about the mask mandates and the health mandates, it's not about the emotion of COVID. You've got to remove all of that from it.
It's about breaking it down to what it actually means and what it is. And there's a lot of misconception out there with it. I was actually talking to one of your employees before we got started, and she fell into the media blitz of what they say it is, and it ultimately comes down to, and it really ties in a lot with what the Iron Pig's gone through and what any small business in Michigan has gone through with 2253, which is overstepping, overreaching. I mean, the Roe versus Wade, it's just a matter of putting it back to the people in the states and saying it's not a constitutional matter, it's not protected under liberty, it's just, let's put it back in the hands of the people.
I would even go even further than that and bring up talking about unelected officials making decisions that have wide-ranging impact. We have talked about our local health department and Lisa Peacock.
Yeah, look at the hell trying to get rid of her.
And she was an unelected official that was making local health decisions that you may or may not have agreed with. But this person that was making some very important decisions, again, we can disagree or have a conversation about those particular decisions, but ultimately it came down to this person was an unelected official that was taking 2253 to the nth extreme. Excuse me, and 2241, 2251, some of the 8.6 public health code for schools, and some of that started to come into play with it. And at least in the case with some of the school board, those officials are at least elected. This position from this health department, and ultimately the state's health department director is an appointee. They're not an elected official. I'm not saying that they should be, but that was the entire point that we were trying to make in our lawsuit. I hate to say it lawsuit, but in our appeal, is that these are unelected officials, and they're beholden to their employer, or they're a person that appoints them, and those powers should be delegated back to the legislature, who are elected officials. And if they make decisions that we don't elect, then James Madison is correct. We find new people to replace them with. Mm-hmm. And that's how we hold. That's the accountability you're always asking about.
Yep, the accountability. And then, but right now with Roe versus Wade, we're also seeing the Biden administration so quickly to react, in that if this were to get overturned, which it has, the things that he's possibly going to try to do to circumvent another branch, which is kind of what we went through with Whitmer, trying to circumvent the legislative branch and just do everything with the executive branch. Yeah. Now all of a sudden Biden's trying to step on judicial branch.
Dude, I'm libertarian, right? I always say it. To me, this is some federalism kind of stuff.
Yeah. By the way, this is my shout out to Biden. I don't need a note card. I don't
sit in your chair.
Sit in your chair,
not in my chair. That is really funny. But yeah, to me, it seems just like federalism. My understanding, at least when I was growing up, 50 states, and each state gets to be a little bit different. That's why each has their own state's constitution.
If you don't like it, move to another state.
Right? So we had this idea of, this melting pot, and we get this idea from everywhere, and each state can be its own experiment.
Yeah.
And in a simpleton's term, which I sometimes include myself in that's the way I look at it, is this decision. Basically, you can put whatever thing on it that you want, but ultimately, really, in my opinion, this ruling, when reading through it, says we're going to give the states the opportunity to make their own decisions, because we believe in the Constitution there aren't those protections as was previously stated.
Yeah, so we're going to put it back in the hands of the people, and by the people, those that we elect to make those decisions for us.
The legislators.
If we don't like them, we elect new people to take their place. Which is, the whole another argument with term limits, and
So I think what you're going to see is politicians that really look on that federalism point of view. You're going to start to see them issuing executive orders on top of executive orders,
which is already said it's coming.
We see that happening all the time. We've seen it already happen. There's a case in front of the Michigan Supreme Court right now that Dana Nessel has argued, my body, my choice, But when it comes to masks on the kids, they have argued the exact opposite, right? So we talk about hypocrisy a lot. So we have seen some crazy things, and they're making arguments to fit their given narrative. And a perfect example of that is keep Mike away from my mouth. Check. We had previously talked about T&V Associates, which was the Rivercrest Catering company.
Which is a company that has gone out of business due to COVID and the policies and shutdown.
I forget. Are they Macomb? I can't remember. Anyways.
Yeah, I want to say it's Macomb.
T&V Associates, they went to the Court of Claims and were looking for declaratory relief, maybe among some other things. But they were basically calling 2253 unconstitutional, as looking for a judge in the Court of Claims to clarify that.
And the state of Michigan, or the state was going against it with their argument of they have no standing, because now that they're out of business, they have no standing to pursue any kind of legal matters, because it's moot, because they're out of business.
So part of the hypocrisy is they will say that they do have standing because, a business entity can still sue somebody else even after they are no longer conducting business. There's some more language in there other than that. That clarifies a little bit more, but part of the hypocrisy of that is judges have recently ruled that some of the child mask mandate cases are no longer have standing because
the mask mandate's been lifted.
The mask mandate has been lifted by the health department or the school that had enacted, or both in some cases.
Which this judge's ruling now states that they do, by his definition, still have standing.
There's the hypocrisy in and of itself. The other part that's I'm laughing, and it's actually really comical because I've read all of these cases front to back to front, sideways, upside down, and I'm probably going to have to do it again several more times as this unfolds. But if you go back and you look at certified questions from the EPGA case from 2020 in October, that led to our case in January 13th of this year, 2022, ruling 2253 unconstitutional, just like the EPGA ruled executive orders. He's also ruled the emergency orders under 2253. And then if you were to read, right, so that's Hunter's ruling.
Yep.
And then if you were to read this nonsense from
and it really is
this judge, and this judge's name is Douglas Shapiro out of the Court of Claims. So he goes on to use certified questions as his ground for saying that 2253 actually is constitutional. And get this, Chris, the way that he goes about saying it is simply the word epidemic being in the first part of
that made it all
2253.
okay. Yeah, and that Hunter didn't know what he was talking about in making the ruling.
He's saying that the word epidemic gives you all the clarity that you need.
Define epidemic. That's the whole thing. I mean, the scope of things that have been done out of a 3-paragraph MCL.
Right.
To zero in on one word and say that makes it all okay. Horse shit.
So they agree that the that certified questions ruling was correct, and then they turn around and say, well, I think it's 32 pages. I forget how many pages. It's more than one. Let's say
it took me a while to read through it.
Right. It's more than 3/4 of a page, which is what 2253 is.
Oh, and it's a good reader
so
too.
They are making the argument that the 3/4 of a page 2253 actually gives more clarity and definition to what can be done than all of those pages from of the Emergency Powers of the Governor Act, which is now also unconstitutional.
I think I just figured out where lip shit disappeared to. He was at his house. He's at Shapiro's house.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I mean, because they both make about as much sense.
So there's a lot of, this thing just reeks, right? So reeks of hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. I can't even say it. Good Lord. So this whole thing, we'll make this available on our website. They go on to talk about due process, which is something that else has, been argued in other cases, that some of these businesses were not afforded due process by 2253, which they're not wrong. State and federal takings clauses have been introduced by us and other lawsuits as well. We gave our federal and state taking clauses portions out of our lawsuit, as well as the health director and the governor we pulled out of our appeal lawsuit, so we could specifically get them on the record about the constitutionality of 2253. So it was a head fake. All they wanted was to release the governor from this lawsuit, and we got him. We pinned him.
Well, and we've talked in previous episodes about how some of these judges are so blatantly tipped towards, pushing the governor's agenda and protecting the administration.
Right.
And
Judge
if you
Lipsy
read,
and
yeah.
Comstock schools, right. That's
And
what you're talking
if you
about.
read through this, trust me, it's painful to read through. But as you read through this, it's even clearer to see how blatant they are in trying to shield their actions and release everybody from accountability or liability.
Yeah.
I mean, guess what? Here we are, how many years? People are still getting COVID. No shit.
So one of the first things I asked our attorney when I got this ruling a week or two ago, that's the Court of Claims. So we had our decision, Judge Hunter right here, 47 district. I can't keep track.
46.
So I asked which carries more weight. If a court of appeals were looking at these two decisions side by side, right? One comes from this district court, and the other one comes from the Court of Claims, which is one court above the other. And he says, no, basically the courts are equal.
One seeking compensation
in the eyes.
One seeking compensation and acknowledgement. The other one.
The difference being that we have a specific ruling against a state agency and the health department specifically,
And the word stricken.
and the words stricken completely, not just portions, but all of this right here,
Yep, completely stricken from the
which
Department of Health.
which is part of the reason why I wanted to bring up some of these bills that were introduced on the House floor last week. HB 6184, HB 6195, and HB 6194. They are basically revisions to 2253 and 2251, I believe, which is another portion of the health code, which is all well, fine, and dandy, but my text message that went out to the 8 or 9 sponsors of this bill, state reps, I basically said, listen, just so everybody knows, this has been ruled unconstitutional by a court in Michigan. So take that into consideration.
Which is the one problem.
To talk about this.
Yeah, and I had no problem with any of those bills. But the one part that really bothers me is where they want the changes made retroactively back to when the first order to shut everything down came into play.
Yeah.
I don't like that. That opens the door to say, look, everything that's happened from that point, it's fine because it was okay. We did this, and this.
I haven't gotten any clarity on that.
You did ask.
You and I have talked about it extensively. I have not gotten any clarity on it, and I think part of the reason is, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but this is my opinion, that these bills that were introduced, given the political environment, are not likely to be signed into law. So they are kind of more of a gesture than anything. Well, and to me, what it's telling is whose names are not sponsoring those bills.
This is true.
And some people may have to reconcile that when asked here pretty soon, given that we've got
some people that really enjoy stepping on soapboxes.
Yeah, that I provide.
Yeah. Didn't see your signature there.
So that we'll see what happens. My inclination is that they're trying to kind of sort of stack the deck, if you will.
Well, and one of the sponsors mentioned to you that the whole point in writing these bills was just to remind Michiganders what Whitmer did. I don't think we need a reminder. I mean, I think it's still right at the forefront of everybody's thoughts.
I see the point that is trying to be made in that, and I do agree, but the other part of it is why aren't there more names on that?
Well, and the other part is how many of the voting population actually are watching?
How many of those people are term limited is really the other question I want to know, the ones that did sign.
How many have you ever tuned in to watch them when they talk about these bills?
No. Oh, it's boring.
It's boring as hell.
Oh, it's boring.
So if you're doing it to draw attention to the matter, nobody's watching it.
I mean, not necessarily that it should be entertaining, but it certainly is absolutely boring. But as government goes, and so goes the law, which is why I never became a lawyer. I just pretend to be one on TV.
Yeah.
But so I think what's going to end up happening is they're kind of stacking the deck against us. If the Court of Appeals decides to take it, they now have a ruling for and a ruling against 2253.
Which will really be interesting, and it could take years, but I mean, it's just hanging out there.
But like I said, anybody that takes certified questions ruling, takes Judge Hunter's ruling from our case, Moore Murphy Hospitality versus
I'm just saying now, there's a fly that's
buzzing
bugging
around.
the hell out of us.
We got the doors open. It's warm. And then you read this ruling, you're going to see that the two rulings for unconstitutionality are so well written compared, to this comic book that this guy has put together. Doug Shapiro, Court of
Just back
Claims
and forth
judge.
all over.
I probably shouldn't talk shit about him. We're probably going to be going to the Court of Claims pretty soon.
When have we
here.
ever put somebody on the don't talk shit list? Well,
That's fair. So we got lots of stuff going on. I appreciate you being here with me as always, hanging out in the restaurant, drinking, talking shit about plenty of topics. We'll have all this stuff available on our website so you guys can peruse through that more boring nonsense that we always get to bring you. But thanks for hanging out with Chris and myself. Murphy's Law Podcast. We're out.